Michael, welcome to the show. For people that don't know you, maybe just give us a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and who you help.
My name is Michael Wark. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I'm a fractional CFO, or Chief Financial Officer, or fractional outsourced, and I help agencies grow. I make sure they don't go broke. I tell them when they can hire or when they need to fire. And the overarching goal is to get them profitable, to build more profit in their business, to build more cash that gives them more options, whether they want to reinvest that in growth, whether they want to take it out as a dividend. So I love talking about agencies, business models, teams. That's what I'm obsessed with. So plug in and help people grow. That's the short summary.
Nice. And from your experience, Michael, what's typically the moment where maybe an agency owner realizes, damn, maybe I need to get someone of Michael's expertise to help us out? What's generally the commonality or the patterns you see?
There's generally two. One of them is a positive story. So I've got a call early next week with someone and they're experiencing amazing growth. So they've won a few awards. They're doing great work as an agency. They've hired a bunch of people, but things are starting to break and they know they need that next layer of analysis about managing their cash flow and planning and forecasting and getting a deeper level of analysis of their business. So it's people on a growth trajectory that are like, uh-oh, we're flying blind here. We're just making decisions depending on what's in the bank at the time. And they know they need that next level of support. And that's when I help them and bring that, 20 years of experience and frameworks and benchmarks and help them sleep at night because they know that they're flying within a good range of things. That's the good side. The other one often is people after a cash crunch. So they've flown too close to the sun and they've experienced the sleepless nights and they're like, oh God, people don't know what they don't know. And some founders operate with a really low cash runway. They kind of flying by the seat of their pants, collecting one invoice to pay payroll. And it's not until they hit a real cash crunch and they can't make payroll or margins suck or their cash is draining. That's the other one where they're like, okay, I know I need help now. And there's lots of people in between that are just kind of plugging along. They're not really growing, not really shrinking. They're kind of making ends meet, but they don't know what they don't know. They don't know they could be probably twice as profitable, but they're also not, it's not a moment for them to reach out because there's nothing burning. There's no burning issue that they need to, search for me. And a lot of people don't know what a CFO or outsourced fractional CFO does. So they actually just don't know that there is support in that area.
Got it. And in my world, the saying is, people pay for pain, right? Unfortunately, things have to get so bad for someone to realize, okay, maybe we should look into this. I'm curious. So one of the trigger points you mentioned, let's say they're not able to make payroll, which is a very visceral experience because I think that you have that kind of euphoric, well, not euphoric, but that kind of eureka moment of, oh God, like the business is about to crumble. When you work with instances like that, like what's your, let's say 1, 2, 3 steps of like trying to maybe help them steer that ship? Because I'm assuming, okay, financially they're realizing they're in trouble, but emotionally they're probably pretty overwhelmed and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, I sometimes call what I do therapy with spreadsheets because there is a huge emotional component to people going through these tricky times. So part of my role is to be that sounding board, that voice of reason, that outlet for the founder, and kind of be that external support. The number one thing I do, and this is even for people who aren't in such a dramatic position, not making payroll hopefully never happens to people, but even people just with low margins, they feel stuck, right? They're not as good as they want to be. Usually to prove our value up front, we try and hunt margin. So during the first 3 months of the engagement, we improve their profitability. And that's probably the number one mindset across most of my clients is where do we find margin? How do we get this business model operating more efficiently, using the existing resources, and make sure that we maintain that as we grow and add more complexity and add more team. So hunting margin and finding profits is probably the first port of call. and focusing on cash flow, cash collections, making sure that we have a good handle on when money's coming in the door and we're building up those reserves. Probably the timeless classics that apply to most agencies that I start to work with.
So you mentioned kind of hunting margins. So typically, what does that look like?
We've got yeah, there's a process. Obviously, we've got our own frameworks and stuff to do that.
Nice.
But high level, if you think about it, run your eye down your own P&L, and, you know, from revenue to cost of sales down through your expenses, through your team. I look at, like, if you're at 10% net profit and we want to get you to 20% net profit, we want to double your profit margin.
Yeah.
I look at the P&L and say, where can I find 1 percentage point of margin right now? And I go down every line and all those little 1%ers. So there might be a price rise in there, or just a repackaging of work, or starting to charge for strategy that we didn't charge for upfront previously. So we can definitely find money in pricing, packaging, all that area of it. That's a big thing I look at as part of the CFO. Then we look at cost of sales. What are our subbies? What are they charging us? Can we do some of that in-house? So see if we can find a few percentage points there. And then obviously reviewing overhead, trimming that as much as possible, reviewing all the classics, subscriptions, things like that. But going deeper on things like team is probably the biggest. That's where I spend most of my time. Is, you know, what are your team costs as a % of revenue? What are they doing? What's that org chart look like? What are we paying them? What are we charging them out at? So getting deep on team is probably where I spend a lot of time with my agency clients, making sure that the team modeling is right, because that is often the biggest expense for most agencies. And all of that, all those little things that add up, is where we find that the cumulative 10% margin improvement.
I like that, because one's assumption could be of a CFO that, you know, you hear with the massive, you know, your blue chip organizations, that they come in and they're just, you know, they're almost like a debt hunter. They're just in to kind of slash all the big things. What I like about what you're saying with your model is, okay, team is a big part, but you're also looking for every other dial to make sure that we're giving ourselves the best opportunity to get things right. It's not just the team. There's other areas where the company hasn't looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes with having a fresh set of eyes. You know, one thought exercise I do with clients is, like, if we were starting this agency from tomorrow, brand new, would we add every single cost we have on here and every single subcontractor, or would we rebuild it a different way? So starting from zero, what are we adding back in? Because there's a lot of, I use like barnacles on a boat that is built up over time, and you need to keep scraping them back. You need to keep resetting. And that's happening a hell of a lot at the moment with this new world of AI and automations and workflows. People's delivery models are changing massively. So there's a lot of change at the moment in that area about efficiencies and that kind of stuff. But like overhead trimming, you can only get to a certain point, right? You still need to pay rent. You still need to keep the lights on. You still need certain subscriptions. So that is kind of like the short sugar hit. And that's what we do to help justify our fee in the short term. But the longer term structural big things are how we're pricing and packaging the work, how we're delivering the work, what team we have to deliver that, and is that flywheel as efficient as possible? And are we charging as much as possible for that? So those are the bigger ones of getting the big picture business model humming.
Okay, this is more extensive than I thought. So I think if there's an agency owner listening to this and they're curious around what Michael does, to me that, you know, when you start going to things like org chart, there's a lot of value in that. What's coming to mind here when we're talking, you know, you mentioned kind of the cost of sales, and you're looking at cost of sales, and maybe one other dial is pricing. When you think about that, I guess, do you also think about maybe the impact that actually does have on the sales team, the sales department? Because typically, right, you'll hear a lot in sales, and I'm coming at this from a very sales-driven lens. You know, one of the big objections that teams hear is, you know, the price. It's the price, it's the price, it's the price. Do you ever get pushback from the founders when you say, guys, I think we probably need to raise the price based off the margins we're seeing here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very scary thing to do. Trying to convince a founder increase their price, especially if their delivery sucks and they've had a bit of team churn and like their product isn't that good. They're, you know, it's very hard to increase your prices on that. So there's ways, there's techniques you can do to minimize your risk. It's always risk versus reward in business. So there's steps you can take to minimize your risk. Obvious ones like only do it on new customers in the door. Don't do it on existing ones to begin, and test and learn, A/B test it. Don't triple your price, just increase a little bit and work your way up. So there's things like that you can do to reduce the fear. Because I have had a client previously, and I did not advise them to do this, but I have had a client previously increase the price for the new financial year on all clients with an email blast of like, hey, everyone, price going up. And they had 30% of the people just say, nah, we're good. So you don't want to expose yourself to things like that. That would be the worst case scenario. Again, I did not advocate for that. They did this off their own bat. But that's an extreme. You can take a baby step in that direction and test it out.
Yeah, and I think a big thing you mentioned there is if the delivery sucks, then the churn is going to be massive. The thing about that is being strategic. It's like if the value is there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if it is, if you've been together, let's say a year, 2 years, and you're consistently delivering, you know, I think you can have frank discussions with business owners and saying, look, our costs are increasing. That's the part. But also in terms of the value we've delivered. You know, a 10x return on what we've done. And at the minute, we're kind of constrained by how much else we can do from a delivery side. So if you still want this level of service, it's going to be at this fee. Something along the lines of that. But I definitely wouldn't advocate, you know, you send these email blasts either, because you know, that is not a way to win a person over to your side. Then they feel like you're just trying to nickel and dime them, right?
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So that's on. Okay, so we kind of touched on, okay, if things go bad, right? There's certain triggers that people think, okay, I'll reach out to Michael. Now let's have maybe a look at when things are going well in terms of growth, because I was listening to one of your YouTube videos, which people should definitely check out if they want to learn more about what you do. One of your videos, you had said, and I'll quote, "You might be able to grow out of trouble, but you can't hire your way out of trouble." Can you explain what you mean, maybe in a bit more detail on that?
Yes, I can. I had a client call earlier today where one of my clients is trying to do exactly this. So very common problem in agency land. You land a big shiny new client, but then your delivery team are immediately stressed because they don't have the capacity to do it. So they hire again. You need to hire again because of that new client. And so even though your profit margins aren't where they need to be, you're like, okay, let's improve our profit by selling more. You add more revenue, but your costs also go up because you don't have the efficiency to deliver that with the existing headcount. So agencies that can never decouple like revenue growth from team growth often won't be doing elite margins, because it's just, even though your business looks like it's bigger and maybe you can tell dinner parties that you're a $10 million agency, your profit margin dropping out at the end is not that good because you have huge team costs, which comes with its own problems. So what I'm trying to get at there is that sales does help with a lot of things in business. It is critical. It's the lifeblood of running a business. It's the number one most important thing. But if your delivery model and your business model and your profit margins aren't dialed in, you're doing all this extra work for not much extra cash. And what's the point?
So what do they actually? So how should they actually approach this? Because I know we were having a conversation before we jumped on air. I've had the experience with the agencies I've worked with where we've helped them get so much more sales that it's broken the delivery. And so then they go to me, well, we don't want any more sales, which was part of the issue I had before with my own model. So how can an agency owner be kind of strategic or smart with this? Because it does kind of seem like a delicate dance. Every business owner, they want to drive more revenue, But also with agency owners, the big metric they're thinking about or should be thinking about is churn. We want to make sure that the quality of delivery is good. But then this is where you come in. It's like, okay, that's important too. but do we have the margin? So how should they, like, what's the model to try to approach that? Like, what's the sensible approach?
Yeah, like the tool I use to solve this riddle is a forecast. We look at what pipeline is coming into the future. We have a look at our P&L into the future, and we've got to look at our predicted cash balance into the future. And then we make more nuanced decisions about what's the pipeline looking like. Oh, hell, we've got 3 big chunky clients landing. Do we have the capacity and the resource to deliver on that? Or do we need to hire? And it's more month by month, looking at that regularly and making those adjustments about either cutting costs, increasing hires, but getting ahead of those decisions by using some sort of forward-facing tool to connect revenue coming in the door with what it takes to deliver that revenue, and do we have the right people to do it? And are we predicting to make a decent profit off both of those things into the future? If not, what levers do we need to pull to change that?
And from your experience, Michael, how good are agency owners actually in terms of predicting revenue? For instance, right, so when I worked at Twitter, I'm coming at it from a different spectrum where they had all the systems, they had the C-suite team, they had the great managers. When I was a sales rep at Twitter, like every Monday morning, the whole kind of sales department would meet, and on a big screen, basically we had our pipeline. And every sales member then, it was called the gut, right? You had to go to the meeting with your gut. Your gut is, what is your predicted pipeline for the week? Obviously,
oh, wow.
Yeah, as I said, these companies, they have more resources, they have more bandwidth to come with these things. Twitter at the time was a publicly traded company, so those things were very important for forecasts. From your experience of working with these type of agency owners, do they have any insight into like projected pipeline? Do they have any system to like actually really figure out, okay, how much revenue is going to come in? Or is this again where you kind of come in and you kind of fill in those gaps?
The reality is most forecasting is a best guess. This is definitely an art, not a science. The further out in time you go, the harder and harder it is to predict what dollars will be landing in that month. So as a general rule, when we turn up to a monthly call, we're looking for the next few months ahead, the next 2 to 3 months ahead. How are they shaping? Because that is really probably the period where you can get the most certainty. Outside of that, unless you've got some really dialed in process where it's just you put $1 into ads and you get 4 back and your leads drop out, most agencies rely on a mixture of sales channels to land their work. I'm sure you would understand that.
Yeah.
And so some of it drops in some months, some of it doesn't. So it's an active conversation. But in all reality, 2 to 3 months, we generally got a read on it and we're having a feel for it. Outside of that, we would apply a probability of like, is that going to drop? Do we push that back? And you can kind of apply a weighted probability to all of those other future dollars, but you can't rely on them as much.
Got it.
But there's another part of revenue forecasting, which is goal setting, like revenue budgeting of where do we want to be. So like what I described there is like a cash planning tool. When are we hiring? When are we firing? You only want to deal in reality of real dollars potentially. But there's the other side of it, which is like goal setting for founders and getting them out of bed in the morning excited, which is where like our targets. And if we want to be a $6 million business, we need to be doing X a month. We need to be growing at Y. That's another side, which is more about growth targets. But in terms of pure cash forecasting, the next 2 to 3, maybe 4 months is really what you can rely on.
That's an interesting mix because I've worked with an agency before that said they were at 2 million and their goal was to get 5 million or get to 5 million. And basically I built them a sales model of if you wanted that type of revenue figures, this is what it would look like from a sales perspective. And that kind of shocked them a small bit. Because and the reason I'm bringing this in, and you probably see this
because it was a lot of work. Is that
yes? Yes, because I was saying if you want to double your business like that, this is what it's going to look like from a sales perspective. We're going to need these amount of salespeople here. We're going to need this management here. And then it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's a lot more work than I thought. How do you balance, I guess, those conversations with those type of founders? Because, you know, you hear the classic, you know, visionary integrator. A lot of founders I deal with, they're very, yeah, we want the big revenue goals. So how do you deal with those conversations? Because you're essentially the voice of reason. You're the numbers guy.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance, I must say. This is where like more of the coaching skills, you know, the therapy with numbers side comes rather than just the pure CFO numbers side. Because I don't want to squash a founder's dream. Like if they've got big goals, like I'm just here to help them get where they want to go, right? So I'm just a co-pilot, giving them some data to help make a better read, help them make a better decision to get them on their journey. So I don't try and squash those dreams, but there is a natural gravity to how quickly a service business can grow. There is laws of physics in terms of when cash starts to get tight and when just it becomes you need to hire too many people and your quality will drop because you can't train them all at once. So there's like natural handbrakes to how an agency grows. The rough rule of thumb, the agency who wanted to double, you didn't say how quickly they wanted to double it, but generally 30% year-on-year growth, you can kind of run off your own steam, your own cash, but cash crunches start to appear if you're trying to grow quicker than that. And you'll probably need some external funding or like the founder to tip some more cash back in to grow quicker than 30% year-on-year, because it just gets harder. There's just payroll gets bigger, lead times get bigger, especially for my agency clients who start to work their way up the food chain and target bigger brands, bigger businesses. The payment terms get worse. Like when you're an agency looking after small businesses, you can kind of dictate your payment terms. But when you start to deal with like here in Australia, big corporate, you know, tier one brands, they're like, no, we'll pay you 30 days, maybe 60 days after you've done all the work. So like cash flow becomes a real challenge as well. So I don't know if that answered your question on how you balance it all, but I see it as like the brand logo of Trimline is a sailing boat, because it's about balance and momentum and speed through that growth curve. And you want to make sure you're not growing too quick where you run out of cash, but you don't want to grow too slow where team members get frustrated at their existing position. They don't get promoted. You don't have money to give them a pay rise. So it's finding that through line between both of the extremes to kind of walk that tight path, which is a challenge for founders.
Yeah. Yeah. And the word that comes to mind there is scale, right? When I'm speaking with founders, 9 times out of 10, well, I mean, considering if they're not in a bad position, most of the founders who are growth mindset, they're like, okay, we want to scale, right? For you, and I know you have this concept of the profit ladder, right? What would you say if a founder said that to you? They were like, Michael, you know, we want to scale. What would you say to them to kind of make them maybe, I wouldn't say reconsider, but like in terms of margins, like what is a point where the business is at if you looked at their margins and you're like, okay, we're in a healthy position to scale? Because I think in your profit ladder you talk about, you know, 10%, 15%, 20%.
Yeah, so in terms of where a business is at net profit wise, anything below 10%, I would say you're not ready to invest in scaling. You don't have the net profit dropping out the end to reinvest too much back in marketing and build cash and afford some pay rises. There's just too much demand on that 10% net profit. So you want to be closer to 20% before you can really feel like this is a business model humming, and you can take because when you scale, what we haven't spoke about is that when you scale, your profit margins drop because you're spending more money on sales and marketing. You're spending more money on hiring team members. So naturally your margins do take a dip as you work your way out the growth curve, and then maybe you stabilize for a while and the margins improve. But if you're scaling from a point of 5% net profit, 10% net profit, you don't have enough cash building at the end of each month to be able to afford this growth journey. So you definitely want to be north of 10, you know, and closer to 20%. You know, the best agencies I've ever worked with, they were hitting 30%, sometimes 40% net profit, which was really good. But generally the rough number most people will try and hit is 20%.
Got it. And so let's say they're at that healthy profit margin. They're like, okay, we want to scale, we want to get more sales. What are typically the mistakes you see founders making at that stage? One thing for me, what I've seen, I'm curious your input on this, is actually the contracts that agencies have when engaging prospective clients. For instance, some agencies I've worked with, they don't have any contract terms. They're just like, yeah, we'll bring on a client, and the relationship is great and they stick with us. But if you're starting to invest in scaling and you're getting a group of maybe 5, 6 new customers at the same time, and then they start churning 3 to 4 months in, then this is really going to impact your margins as well, because now you're going to have to start spending more to get more in the pipeline. What's your maybe experience there? What do you typically see in terms of mistakes people make?
Mistakes people make when trying to scale?
Yeah.
I mean, investing cash in marketing that doesn't work is the obvious one. Like, they want to make a splash, and so they start scattergunning money around in different marketing initiatives that don't really move the needle. To get to your point of, and we've kind of been dancing around this topic, I think it's a really good one. Usually delivery starts to break when they scale. So they so focus on sales, and they bring someone like you in who makes it rain. They get a river of leads. Founder gets tied up in that. But the delivery team starts to break and churn picks up. And that is one of the natural handbrakes on how fast an agency can scale. So if you can scale your delivery just as quick as sales and the quality maintains, then you're on a winning business model. But those two things need to be linked for that to happen. And you must have an awesome training program to get new hires up to speed to maintain that quality. So yeah, investing money in the wrong places to grow. Often also it's like poor hiring decisions. So you need to grow, you need leaders. Often when I'm helping like $1 million agency get to a $5 million agency, for example, the founder wants to build themselves out. So we need to hire that expensive middle management layer. So if you make the wrong expensive hire there, that sets you back months and months because it's expensive. It's not the right fit. It potentially leads to poor delivery quality. So getting the hiring decisions right, getting where you're investing your marketing dollars right, getting your training right. That's the problem with a service business. There's a lot of places it can break.
Yeah. And from your, I'm curious on this management part, from your experience of working with these agencies, like what is the impact of a bad hire, particularly at management level? Have you been kind of privy to kind of seeing and hearing some of the consequences of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my 7th year in the game helping agencies full time. I've been an accountant 20 years, but full-time CFO agency 7 years. And over that time, seen both multiple times. A recent one, as an experience share client, needed a new head of SEO. And it was just the wrong fit. The person wanted to be strategic, but they didn't want to get in the trenches and do any actual work. Didn't want to do any real billable work. So they thought they would just, just send that off to the lackeys to do. And they were really good at SEO technically, but they weren't actually a people manager. They weren't a leader of humans. And that became a real problem because being the head of required a bunch of different skill sets that perhaps that founder hadn't thought through completely. And the person came with a good rep because they knew stuff, but they couldn't train people. They couldn't display it. They didn't want to get in the trenches. So it was a bit of a nightmare because it set that department back. We had churn. But the good news is we've since found an awesome replacement. We moved that person on. And here's a hot tip for hiring. Make sure you've got as long a probation period as possible. In Australia, you can get up to 6 months probation. So you can test them out and know if they're the right fit. Otherwise, you can kind of get rid of them a bit easier. So that's one example. A second example I could give you was at an even more senior level. And it actually had a really toxic effect on the overall team's culture because this person was just, again, a little bit entitled and their mindset infected a bunch of other people. And it was a real problem and they didn't get on top of it early enough. So that was a real painful experience. So anyone who has leverage, any hire that has leverage in your business, like they lead a team or they manage a bunch of your clients, you got to be real careful with those hires because there is compounding effects to getting it right or wrong for those kind of key positions that have leverage.
I think that's such a valid point. And one I don't think most business owners actually think about, because a lot of what I see is when people are hiring, they're doing it for, well, they're either doing it to grow or they're doing it for instant relief. Instant relief meaning just like my calendar slammed, I don't want to think about this anymore. Like in my world, the biggest mistakes I see is I'm just going to hire sales reps. I'll let them take care of the sales. I'm sick of taking the sales calls. My calendar's blocked up. I'm done. What typically then happens then is the business goes through a process of churning and burning through sales reps. Why? One, the initial infrastructure wasn't built to make them successful. Sales still lives in the founder's head. There's no process, there's no playbook, and then the narrative then starts building. And I'm curious if you hear this as well, that I can't find good sales reps. The sales reps I do hire, they don't perform.
Sales is hard. Yeah.
I'm back to square one, and then maybe the next logical decision, and this is why I wanted to dig a bit deeper on the management part, is I'll hire a sales manager. And if they have a good track record, they will have leverage. And similar to this heady SEO person, they want to be the conductor. They don't want to get their hands dirty and maybe dealing with specific deals. So very quickly, let's say what a founder thought was like an instant pill solution of I'm getting my time back, then becomes a very expensive and painful experience. What to that founder who's still listening to this, what do you think is a solution to maybe mitigate against this? I have one in mind, but I'm curious to hear what your solution would be.
In that exact situation?
Well, more so, instead of hiring maybe an expensive manager, is there anything they can do maybe as a stepping stone? Like, for instance, what I'm thinking about is fractional. A fractional role. Instead of going straight to the management, it's like actually try someone maybe in a fractional position. The cost is going to be minimal in comparison to the full time. They're not going to have all the extra benefits. You can maybe help them build up some of those missing processes and playbooks, and then you can make a decision. Then, do you want to still hire that senior management person, or are you happy with this fractional? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's multiple ways you can get creative with team, for sure. Fractional hire, I've got a client who has got a great technique where they hire really experienced people, like twice their age, but they got so much experience and knowledge, but they're just on 2 days a week. That's all they want. They've got other stuff going on. And so they're manageable because it's only a couple of days a week, but you still get all that experience and knowledge. So fractional, couple days a week. Another client at the moment, we can't quite afford, they've got a pricing problem that I'm helping them solve, but in the meantime, they can't quite afford a head of paid media because those roles are very expensive to hire a local Australian for that at the moment. Just the market's competitive for paid. So a strategy we're using there is to get a junior with promise, with up and coming ability, who shows an ability to learn quickly. We're testing that to make sure they can learn quickly. They're not full of shit, and that they've got a good handle on AI. And we're hiring a subcontractor with a lot of years, all above board, like telling them this is what we're doing, to train up that junior to an experience level. So it's like it's a paid training program. The subcontractor doesn't want the full-time role, but we're committing to them for a period of time to help us train up this junior. They won't be up to the level of a head of, but they're going to get us above to where they would have if we just threw the junior in the deep end. So more creative ways where we can access that experience, like you said, on a fractional way, getting a subby to train a couple of days a week. There's different ways you can do it.
Love that. And then maybe switching gears to, let's say, the full-time staff. So we talked about maybe some solutions there, but I know when we were going back and forth over email, you were basically saying that agencies obsess over top-line revenue, but the real test is whether each person is actually producing, right? And I know you gave some figures around that. In sales, I have figures I can drop into this as well later. But in terms of how should founders think about this? If I'm hiring a person, what should be the output? What should be the economic return? What should they look at?
Yeah, and let's let's narrow it down to like technicians or doers in the business. So we're not, we're not hiring a salesperson. I'll let you set goals for that. But generally, for anyone who they are going to be on client work, when you hire them, whatever their hours a week are, in Australia, it's standard is 38 hours a week. You want 75% of their time on billable work. So you want to have enough work to give them that, 75% of their week is on client work. And then in terms of what that client work is worth, you want them to be earning generally, 2 to 3 times their base cost in revenue. So if you're paying someone 10K a month, you want them ideally to be bringing in, managing at least, 30K a month. So that ratio of what you're paying them and what they're bringing in the business is in a decent level. That shrinks when you look at it on a macro level, because across a whole team, there's people who are less billable, like management. And so as a whole business model for an agency, generally you want all your team costs to be taking up ideally 50% of revenue or less, which shows you that our total wage is only bringing in 2 times its worth, right? There's a 50% of revenue. So on an individual doer level, you want that to be closer to 3, but because when you bring it down to the whole team and the founder's often not doing billable stuff, that reduces a little bit. So that's the rough idea of it. And the number one metric I've got on my dashboards for agencies that hopefully, they could recreate it at home listening to this is revenue per full-time employee. And that's looking at it, the same metric, but in a kind of way that you can look at month on month. So rev per full-timer is a great metric people should look up. And I have a graph month on month for that on my dashboards for all my agencies.
Amazing. And yeah, from a sales side, really, if we're looking to take on a salesperson, let's say their salary is 50K, let's say their salary or their full-time earning potential, because in sales there's that commission incentive. Let's say all in, if it's 100K, we basically want that sales rep to bring in a minimum of 400K. We want to see that 4x return, just because of cost of sales as well. And then once we're confident on that, then that says to the business owner, okay, we have one sales rep who's able to deliver on that. Then it becomes a game of, okay, if we do want to scale, we can hire more sales reps based off this benchmark. However, as some of the points you brought up earlier, we want to make sure we're doing that delicate dance between, we don't want to break delivery, we want to make sure our margin's okay. But typically from a sales perspective, it's 4x.
And let's be clear with the audience. That's like, for me, the 3x markup or revenue that they're looking after, that's like minimum. That's not like the end goal. That is like just to be things to be in balance. Obviously, let's maximize it like to the moon with all of these things.
You mentioned earlier, and I nearly took the bait and jumped in, but my sense was that could lead us another direction. You touched on AI, right? It's obviously it's the word of the year. Like any conferences I'm going to where there's a lot of agency owners, you'll meet one agency owner and they're inspired. Even where I work right now, sometimes I go to co-working space. There's a few agency owners there, and they've just been, head down, obsessed for the last 3 months, just like building. Then you have another section of agency owners who are petrified. They're like, this is going to absolutely kill our model. What have you been hearing and seeing when it comes to AI?
Yeah, look, it's the hot topic, of course. I've actually got some hard data on how agencies are using it here in Australia. I'm just about to release a report, and I'll link it below this video, maybe for the audience if they want to have a look at it. Mainly Australian independent agencies, but to be honest, the lessons apply to most agencies around the world. And we asked them like who's using AI. Vast majority of people were. I asked them AI's impact on their net profit margins. So like, actually, is it moving the needle in the business rather than just being a shiny object? 52% were neutral. They couldn't really see if it had impacted. But 44% of respondents, and we had over 120 people, so a decent data set, said they're delivering more with the same team. So they were seeing efficiency gains from it. So everyone's using it is what I took out of this, but 44% of people are actually capturing margin. So they're getting more efficient with it, keeping their prices the same. but being able to deliver more output because of these efficiencies. So that's kind of the hidden secret amongst, especially of the clients at the moment. Not everyone's putting it on the tin, but everyone's kind of getting quicker behind the scenes and still capturing the margin, because there hasn't been a huge downward pressure in prices yet, but I can see that coming down the pipe, that there will be pressure on agencies. And the really interesting metric in the survey that, and also anecdotally through clients and people in the game, is that a lot of companies are now bringing what agencies used to do in-house. So the pie of available work for agencies is actually shrinking, because why pay an agency when you've got a junior with Claude who can probably whack something together for you? So the pendulum kind of swings on in-housing, then agencies in-housing, but that trend seems to be prevalent too, that the tools that agencies are using, your clients are also using and playing around with too, right? They're working out how they can pay you less and do it themselves. So it's still the Wild West, but it's widespread use. Some people are capturing the margin, and 45% of our respondents were keeping their price the same and capturing the value, which was interesting. So some people are seeing that net profit improvement, which is great.
Yeah, it's I think people are still trying to make sense of it. Of, is it a net gain? Is it a loss? Like for instance, I have an interesting case study where I have 2 agency clients, and one of the agency clients was a subcontractor of that other agency clients I'm working with. So basically, it was a white label arrangement, and one of the agencies now has terminated that arrangement because they're saying we're bringing this in house.
Exactly.
So I have a visceral example of this is happening right now, which then means, how do people survive? I think it comes back to, again, if you become indispensable, if you're giving so much value, then it's very hard to cut that. Yes, AI is going to help amazingly, but at the end of the day, behind AI is a person, and the quality of output is going to be derived from the quality of input. So that's why in terms of, there is a narrative of, like, the world is screwed, no one's going to have jobs. I think it's just going to be a case of, maybe unfortunately for a period of time, it'll feel like Darwinianism. It's going to be the rises that are the cream is going to rise to the top. The people with expertise, they're going to do very well. My fear with it is junior people coming up, just out of university. How are they going to get those, graduate type jobs? How are they going to get their first job? Because it seems right now that there is a lot of pressure on that market. It's going to be harder for new graduates to get into the market.
100%. Yeah, they should get into AI implementation, which is a new skill set that no one has. So at least they can ride the new wave rather than trying to build an old skill, because that's actually borne out in our survey data. Last year, we did the survey, 2025. 69% people were looking to grow headcount for the coming 12 months. This year, that dropped from 60 down to 40. So a lot less people are looking to grow their headcount, and 50% of people are just looking to keep it the same. And that went up. So last year, 18% were going to keep like a headcount freeze. Now 52% of people are going to have a headcount freeze. So basically, everyone's put a brakes on hiring and working out what they can do with existing resources and existing tools out there in the AI market. And that's kind of where I see it going. And what I think the future of agencies who want to stay ahead is thinking about who you're hiring and what the skills of the future are that are going to best utilize those tools, because it may not be what a traditional agency used to hire for. Like, I've got clients who are got data scientists on their team, and that sounds weird, but like, it's all going to be data now and agents using it. And so having those different specialist skill sets that maybe your client doesn't have could set you apart as well. So it's about, like, who is the best team to hire to give you that alpha or that advantage. And that might be different for different agencies, but yeah, I mean, it changes month to month, doesn't it? No one knows where it's going is the short answer.
Yeah, it's exciting. From my perspective, when I start seeing some of the efficiencies it's making in my business, I'm very bullish on it. So look,
Yeah, the one point I wanted to say is, though, I don't think there's been a wave of awesome new creative ideas and innovation from these tools. They're just pattern recognizers. So in terms of workflows, following set processes, those things, I think there'll be awesome improvement. But for people with genuinely new thinking and creative ideas, I think they will still be super valuable, because we're going to get sick of AI slop and everyone's sounding exactly the same. And it's all, you can already read something that's just been churned out through an LLM. So those people who can avoid that and still have original thinking, they're still going to be valuable.
For sure. And speaking of value, as we kind of draw this to a close, in terms of investment, right? Where do you think, let's say, an agency owner underinvests in their business? Like if you're looking at like where their money is going, is it finance? Is it marketing? Is it delivery? Is it sales? Or do you see any patterns?
I think overall, a lot of agency owners suck at sales. And this is, you didn't tell me to say this, by the way, but they're bad at marketing themselves, and they often don't take it seriously or do it consistently enough.
Yeah.
So that area is one that a lot of the bets are long-term, and you've got to be consistent at it to see the return. So investing in that side of the business, I think a lot of agency owners underinvest in that area for sure. A lot of agency owners overinvest in the wrong type of team members, and that's where a lot of their margin gets eaten up. But it just depends on the level of agency, what stage of the growth they're at, what their key problem is at the time. So where you start to like turn on the money tap and point it, depends on the problem at the time. There's so many different places. But as general rule, I think spending more on marketing to build the pipeline and build certainty over what's coming in the door is a definite place to think about.
Why, based off your experience, why do you think that's maybe a bit of a blind spot for them? Why are they looking at, team and delivery first?
It's exactly what you said at the start. You solve the sales problem for people, and they get so busy in delivery that they're like, I don't want more clients. More clients equals more stress. So they kind of like put that from their head, and they're like, I don't want to market to anyone. I'm too busy I'm already working late nights in delivery. So they're stuck in delivery or with too much on their plate. And so they don't want to invest in those long-term things that they need to. And if they're busy in delivery, they're obviously investing in that side of the business as well.
Perfect. And last question, what would be your final piece of advice for, they could either be agency founders, owners, or even CEOs? What would be your advice to them if, let's say, they know there's something maybe off with their numbers, but they kind of keep kicking the can down the road? What's your kind of message to them to get them to kind of like, okay, this is something we need to look at now?
If you're not consistently hitting north of 10% net profit and including a founder wage in there on the P&L, your business model is broken, and you need to fix that before you fix anything else in your business. You won't be able to build cash quick enough to help give you options in other areas. So if you're not north of 10% net profit consistently, you've got a serious problem, and you should look at it. And ideally, you want to be obviously 20%. So that would be the first red flag that I'd look for.
Great advice. And just to wrap this up, I guess if people have listened to this and got value, which I think based off some of the stuff you brought up, there's going to be a lot of blind spots people probably haven't been aware of. Where can people learn more about what you do, Michael?
The website for Trimline is trimline.co. So they can jump on the website and have a look. I'm also fairly active on LinkedIn. So Michael Wark, W-A-R-K, on LinkedIn. And I usually float around on there a few days a week, getting into arguments over agency metrics. So they can still connect with me on there as well.
Amazing. Michael, thank you for your time, and we shall chat soon.
Thanks, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, let me just stop this.